Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining from. My name is Grace Krauser, and I'm a Program Officer for the Ideal Award. Thank you for joining the Resource Reveal session for Holistic Organizational Capacity Assessment Instrument and Caregiver Mental Health Knowledge Sharing Series and Resource Reveal. Before we get started, I would like everyone to be aware that we will be providing French and Spanish interpretation for this session. If you'd like to follow the event in French or Spanish, you will need to click the small globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen where it says interpretation. There's a picture demonstrated in the presentation slide. And then you select either French or Spanish. Once you've selected your language, you can choose to mute the original audio, or you can hear it in the background at a lower volume. For English speakers, please select English as your interpretation language and mute the original audio. If you have any technical issues during the session, please send a chat message to Ideal, and we will do our best to assist you. Now is a good time to practice the chat function by introducing yourselves. I see some of you have already begun. Please share your name, your organization, position, and where you may be calling in from. Looks like we have Phil joining us. Thank you so much, Phil, for kicking us off. For this 60-minute session, we will be having two 15-minute presentations followed by a 30-minute Q&A portion. Each presenter has prepared a key talking points focused on how to use and apply their resources in various contexts. For today's presentation, we have Ms. Sogita Imad, Project Coordinator of Strengthening the Nkawa Humanitarian Committee to Respond Project, or SACAR, and Mr. Kushal Neogy, the Sub-Regional Director for Partnerships, joining us from CRS, or Catholic Relief Services. They will be presenting on the Holistic Organizational Capacity Assessment Instrument, designed to help organizations engage in a process of continuous assessment and improvement. They will present about the tool itself, the virtual use during COVID-19 pandemic, and it being a one-stop shop for resources in partnership and capacity strengthening. Following, we'll have Food for the Hungry's Erin Pfeiffer, Independent Senior Technical Advisor in Global Maternal and Child Health and Nutrition, and Mariamu Amadi, the Senior Technical Advisor for Health and Nutrition. They will present a Caregiver Mental Health Knowledge Sharing Series that provides evidence, best practices, and practical resources for advancing caregiver mental health worldwide. Participants gain access to new resources in mental health and will learn about the critical role mental health plays in food security and nutrition. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Zubaida, to go ahead and play those presentations. Thank you.
Welcome to this session, and thanks to the organizers for this opportunity to share our work with the esteemed gathering today. We have pulled in our experience to work with partners in over 100 countries in form of an open platform. On behalf of Catholic Relief Services and our partners in Iraq, Nkawa Humanitarian Committee, we welcome you to this webinar. CRS has developed a public-facing website. It is an interactive website and learning platform called the Institute for Capacity Strengthening. The purpose is to share our learning, tools, job aids, materials, reports, and intended audience includes CRS colleagues, our partners, peers, donors, and anyone who is interested in capacity strengthening of their organization. It is an open platform, accessible to all. One of such resource is the Institutional Strengthening Guide, or ISG in short. Since we work through and with the partners, it is pertinent that we build their capacity so that they serve the community as an agile and effective organization. Stronger systems and structures enable them to be responsible stewards of the society. To achieve this aim, this guide was developed. One of the chapters of this guide, which is chapter 2, is Hawkeye, and it is a tool as well as as part of the ISG. And Hawkeye stands for Holistic Organizational Capacity Assessment Instrument. Using this Hawkeye tool, CRS assists its partners to conduct a self-analysis of their strengths and challenges, develop an action plan, and improve through various capacity strengthening processes. Hawkeye examines 10 capacity areas that cover different aspects of an organization. The 10 areas are identity and governance, strategy and planning, general management, external relations and partnerships, sustainability, organizational learning, human resources management, financial and physical resources management, program services and result, and not the least one, gender equality and integration. So all these areas, they cover into the review of the organization. How we do that? We facilitate the exercise from a perspective of level of achievement on these parameters, which could be strong, which could be weak, needs improvement, and that categories, and the level of priority. And that is completely driven by the organization based on willingness and urgency. Each capacity area has sub areas that covers it in a holistic way. An example of this is the capacity area of strategy and planning that is further divided into governance, mission, vision, values, stakeholder participation, organizational constitution, organizational culture, organizational structure. A mixed group of partner staff reflect on these areas and explore where they stand as an agency. We now present this capacity strengthening cycle as the cycle represents such exercise is recommended at the beginning, midterm, and end line of the agreed timeline. It may be as per the project cycle, grant status, or sometimes as a partnership support. Now I invite Ms. Sogita Imad from our partner in Iraq, Ankava Humanitarian Committee, where we conducted this Hawkeye assessment some time back, and to share her experience. Over to you, Sogita.
Thank you, Kushal. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen to our experience. We as AHC are very happy to share our Hawkeye experience with you. I am Sorita, as Kushal mentioned, and I am the project coordinator of Strengthening the Ankawa Humanitarian Committee to Respond project. CRS Iraq and the Ankawa Humanitarian Committee are implementing a USAID-funded project called Transitional Assistance for Internally Displaced People in Iraq, which includes a significant capacity strengthening component. The objective of these capacity strengthening activities is to build the institutional capacities and strengthen the skills of the organization staff to enable them to receive and manage funds from public donors, including USAID. In fact, in addition to the TA project, AHC received another direct grant from USAID that complements the capacity strengthening activities under the TA project and allows us to prove that we are able to implement projects funded by public donors. To assess the current capacities of the organization, we used the full Hawkeye assessment tool. And because of COVID, we could not arrange meetings in person. So we had to conduct them online through Microsoft Teams. The online experience was challenging because it lacked human contact, but both CRS and AHC worked very hard on the positive sides of the experience while adapting to the context. The assessment consisted of a series of questions under 10 categories. AHC reflected on each statement based on its current situation and realities. And looking at the system we had or we didn't have in place, it required us to take the lead and in the reflection and on the experience, to be honest and transparent through the process and clearly identify AHC's reality. We trusted both the process and CRS to capture the reality of the organization. After this exercise that was conducted over several days, we had to let things sink in. We held internal meetings and discussed what AHC needs the most and worked jointly with CRS to identify the priority topics on which we wanted to work on, keeping in mind the recommendations of our donor. Some topics were obvious, like strengthening financial systems of the organization, and others were less obvious, like staff development. Then, we developed an action plan jointly with CRS colleagues team and kept the communication open between us to reflect on how to implement this action plan, how to adapt it to the context of our organization, our learning preferences, and our needs. The noticeable changes are finalized HR policies, such as recruitment and contracting policy, office norms, leaves and holidays, and of course, code of conduct. At the current time, we have reached the Hawkeye mid-assessment phase. AHC has accomplished so much in the past 8 months and is aware that the pathway we have taken is so long. We have developed policies for our operational departments, identified clear procedures, and we are now working to develop our proof of concept project with the support of CRS. We are looking forward to the midterm Hawkeye assessment to see these improvements and accomplishments we have achieved so far translated into numbers and facts, and to review our action plan or priorities according to the results. Thank you again for the time you have taken to listen to our experience, and over to you, Kushal.
Thank you so much, Sogita. It was nice to listen to your experiences. I now present some of the tips for success, especially when we have done this in a virtual mode. Need to have patience as well as space the activity for better reflection and assimilation. When we are doing this from a distance, it takes time to sink in. Everybody has to sit from a different distance, different locations, and they need to talk sometimes after the exercise or during the process is going on. So we need time to do that. This particular exercise, which Sogita just now explained, it took almost a month to understand and go through that process with short breaks and different series of events. During the event, when we are doing, it is also important to have breaks in the sessions and mindful of the local cultural aspects. It could be prayers, it could be other things that is needed. It is more pertinent when it is done virtually. In any workshop or any discussion or reflection, there are some silent speakers or participants. We need to motivate them and ensure that everyone is participated. Otherwise, they are lost behind the curtains or behind the screen, and we don't know their presence. Even if they have a feeble opinion, that can be sometimes very crucial. We need to be prepared for the technological challenges and have backup plans. We used to share our PowerPoint presentations, documents with multiple people, so that in case of a failure, somebody else can put us up and then make the presentation. Since there were some co-facilitators, it is important to have good understanding and collaboration among the co-facilitators so that it's a seamless experience for everybody. We do collect feedback, but then in virtual mode, collecting feedback is important, but it is also important to respond to them genuinely because that is crucial and it helps them to understand. Just to wrap up, it was nice talking to you all and share our experiences. Do visit our website and write to us in case you have any questions, comments, or suggestions on this email ID. Thank you so much for this opportunity and look forward to your questions and answers. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Mariamu Amadi, and I'm with Food for the Hungry. I'm here with my colleague, Erin Pfeiffer, and we will be sharing about Food for the Hungry's Caregiver Mental Health Knowledge Sharing Series and Resources. The vision of Food for the Hungry to end all forms of human poverty worldwide includes working to understand the underlying causes of malnutrition and food insecurity. Over the past several years, FH has become actively involved in the intersection between caregiver mental health and nutrition outcomes and has become increasingly engaged with food security and nutrition stakeholders who have an interest in how mental health affects caregiver well-being as well as child growth and development. While mental health is gaining global attention, Food for the Hungry identified the lack of collective platforms for exchange of knowledge, research, tools, and best practices related to caregiver mental health and its intersection with food security and nutrition. Thus, the Ideal Microgrant funded knowledge sharing series aimed to fill this gap with an innovative global community of practice that brings together researchers, implementers, policymakers, and funders who can collectively contribute to the advancement and effectiveness of food security initiatives globally. So maternal mental health and the mental health of other primary caregivers of young children is increasingly recognized globally as a critical component of women's well-being that has undeniable, long-lasting, or even permanent impact on her welfare, her family, and the health and development of her children. Global leaders are recognizing that holistic health and well-being cannot be achieved without addressing mental health, and that poor mental health may be a barrier to achieving optimal food and nutrition outcomes. Furthermore, the unforeseen COVID-19 global pandemic exposed and emphasized the need for attention and investment in both mental health and food insecurity and malnutrition, particularly in low-resource settings. It's estimated that at least 1 in 5 mothers in developing countries experience depression after childbirth, and 15 to 23% of children live with a parent suffering from mental illness. And despite high prevalence rates, mental health conditions are often under-recognized, infrequently measured, and are characterized by poor access to treatment options. Additionally, low and middle income countries include over 80% of the global population, but yet includes less than 20% of the world's mental health resources. So evidence suggests that mental health of caregivers impacts how they understand, respond to, and interact with children, which can have a profound impact on a child's development and future health. In low-income settings, maternal depression has been linked directly to low birth weights and undernutrition during the first year of life, as well as high rates of diarrhea diseases, incomplete immunization, and poor cognitive and emotional development in young children. There's growing evidence that these negative effects of maternal mental disorders on the growth and development of children are independent of the influence of poverty, malnutrition, and chronic social adversity. And with that, I will hand the mic over to my colleague, Erin. to talk about the Caregiver Mental Health Knowledge Sharing Series in more depth. Erin?
Thank you so much, Mariamu. My name is Erin Pfeiffer, and I served as one of the coordinators of the Caregiver Mental Health Knowledge Sharing Series. In light of the significance of caregiver mental health that was described, FH established a year-long knowledge sharing series in order to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, evidence, and resources, to promote integration of mental health interventions into global policy and programming, to drive future research and advance best practices, and to form collaborations and partnerships. The series was planned to be launched in mid-2020 and an in-person conference in Kigali. Due to the global pandemic, FH partnered with global learning partners to instead design a highly interactive, multilingual mini-series of 4 live sessions on October 20th and 27th, November 10th and 17th of 2020. These sessions focused on the importance and impact of caregiver mental health on food security, nutrition, and other development outcomes, implementation, research, and advocacy. The image here is a graphic that was drawn live by an illustrator during one of the first sessions. The virtual nature of the event allowed for a really broad spread of collaborators, presenters, and participants, perhaps even more so than if it had been live in Kigali. Over 200 unique individuals participated in one or more session of the mini-series launch, representing 60 different organizations in 28 countries. These icons show just a few of the entities who presented during or participated during the series. Following the launch of the knowledge sharing series in the fall of 2020, 3 task forces were formed by participants who were interested in working together to identify gaps in the resources and tools that were available to advance caregiver mental health in global development. These groups then selected one area of concentration to work on collaboratively. The 3 task forces, focusing on implementation, research, and advocacy, met monthly or bi-weekly to collaborate on their effort, and there were subgroup meetings in between. These working groups chose to develop resources and tools related to how to advance implementation, research, and advocacy, which could then be disseminated and utilized by the broader global health community. The final products were shared live in a webinar during that last month, and they were all these registrants and across the entire Caregiver Mental Health Knowledge Sharing Series network, which includes about 300 subscribers. We also shared it through the Global Mental Health Action Network, which includes about 1,200 members across 100 countries. I'll provide a brief overview of the resources that were developed, and you can access any of them yourself at the website here, caregivermentalhealth.org/resources. The advocacy task force members developed a position paper highlighting the evidence and importance of caregiver mental health in global development. This brief can be used as a tool to petition funders, decision makers, and government entities to integrate caregiver mental health into existing mechanisms. The group also documented 2 case studies of countries that have made great strides in prioritizing mental health nationally, Lebanon and Rwanda. The implementation working group collaborated to identify and concisely summarize examples of entities that have addressed caregiver mental health in sub-Saharan Africa. You can see the list here of case studies that were highlighted. The request for case studies was disseminated across a large number of networks and listservs, and a total of 15 case studies were documented, and along with links for contact information and supporting documents for readers to find out more. The task force aims to share these key findings with other implementing organizations as a means of informing and inspiring others to address the mental health of primary caretakers of children. One of the case studies that FH is leading that was highlighted here is the integration of Problem Management Plus into the commonly utilized behavior change approach care groups. PM Plus aims to help people improve the management of practical problems and common mental health problems, along with problem-solving counseling and methods for managing stress and other challenges. FH is actively working to pilot this integrated module in Uganda and in Guatemala. I would love to keep you updated on the progress of that. Lastly, the research task force decided to examine the impact of COVID-19 on caregiver mental health, and they compiled a rapid research review to understand the evidence to date on the relationship between caregiver mental health and COVID-19 pandemic, to understand any mediating and confounding factors such as food security and nutrition, parenting behaviors, and disability. This really ambitious group made a final product that has a lot of detail. And as I mentioned, each of these final products is available for download on our own website. COVID-19 certainly impacted this series and our work. The most significant challenge was certainly not being able to have the in-person launch in Rwanda. But from our previous experience in the US, having a knowledge sharing series here, we were looking forward to a really dynamic, interactive, multi-day workshop. However, despite this disappointment, the series collaborators really were able to pivot the in-person event to make it a very rich, highly dynamic mini-series with these 4 virtual meetings. And it did lead to a much wider participation and diversity of audience than we could have expected for an in-person event. The fact that nearly 200 individuals participated and across 28 countries really indicates the wide reach. Furthermore, the importance of mental health that was given during the global pandemic and the increased attention probably highlighted this topic more than we would have ever had before. The time is now to capitalize on the progress being made globally in mental health, food security, and nutrition. This grant-funded initiative made significant contributions towards empowering others and other relevant stakeholders with additional knowledge, skills, connections, and tools to make the first step towards ensuring complete physical, mental, and social well-being for individuals worldwide. We hope you will explore these resources and take a role in promoting mental health globally. Thank you.
Welcome back. Those were excellent presentations. I want to invite the presenters to turn on their cameras for the Q&A session. We're so lucky to have them here with us. And I see that we didn't have any questions coming in the chat, so please feel free to use the chat now to populate with questions. Kushal, so Geeta, are you able to turn on your cameras for this session? There you are. So again, I'd like to thank you all for sharing your presentations, your tools, and these resources with the implementer community. We've really benefited from learning from your experiences. I actually did have a question for Kushal about the CRS tool. So it mentions the different capacity areas, and I'm interested to know, how did you all come about identifying those particular areas, as well as were there any sort of areas of emphasis that you saw coming through because of COVID-19? So is there a particular capacity area that became more relevant because of the pandemic?
Thank you, Grace, for that question. COVID played a role in doing it, how we do or how we conduct a session on organizational assessment, but not per se like what is, how we can focus on doing things and all, because again, the organization, there are many things that needs to happen and there are capacity strengthening areas for the organization. So it is the how part that COVID has a major contribution or role to play, but then not as such in the area of a particular capacity area and all, that may not have changed. From our side, since we are partnering with this organization, so in ideal situation, we could have gone there and did that and sit with them and then do that. But here we had to do it virtually. So that is the only challenge. And then it has comes with their own challenge, and face-to-face interaction and all were a limitation.
Yeah, you mentioned something around motivating silent participants. I wondered if you could share any tips to encourage our participants to
Sure.
participate.
Absolutely. See, we have to be mindful of people who are silent, and we know the participant list who are there and all, and then maybe ask a prompt sometimes via media, like, okay, in the Teams, you can also interact with people on a one-to-one. So you can do that to check that how you are feeling, is there anything, or sometimes if you are familiar with them, then also maybe sometimes it is good to check with them, okay, what is your opinion on this? Not to put anybody on the spot, but then also try to see their opinion and all. Sometimes these silent people may give a very, very mild answer, or something which is significant but may not be understood well. So as one of the points in the PPT that I presented was that look for those weak signals, because they could be silent. I mean, they could be a new person, they may be shy, they may be hesitant to talk, but then you can explore more. You further dig them, saying that, okay, fine, this is a good point, but then can you explain more? Can you say a bit more? What is your experience dealing with them? Things like that helps people to open up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kushal. I liked your point about mindfulness and being, respectful of the people that are participating, while also creating an environment that enables and encourages active participation. I did want to invite Sogita to maybe respond to this question from Adi. How long did it take you to complete each entity? So it seems like time might be an issue. I noticed that Kushal mentioned that you all staggered and had a staggered approach to the assessment and to implementing those pieces. So I'd love to hear about how long did it take you to complete each entity, and your reflections on that.
You're on mute, Sogita.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Adi, for the question, and thank you, guys. Basically, the assessment process took us about 3 to 4 days, if I remember well. Then we moved to the next phase, which was prioritization of the development areas, which, as I explained in the presentation, we took time thoroughly to think about what do we need more, what to prioritize, what our organization needs to build a strong infrastructure. Then with CRS colleagues in Iraq and with the help of Kushal, we put an action plan in taking into consideration the time of project implementation we have and the resources. So basically, from the assessment till the submitting the action plan to USAID, it took us 2 months, I would say.
Very interesting. And you mentioned kind of 2 areas that were highlighted during the assessment. You mentioned financial capacity strengthening, I believe, as one of the areas, and the other one was staff development, and that one, I think you said, surprised you. I would love if you could elaborate a little bit on what came out in the assessment and how you all were addressing that in the action plan.
Can you hear me? Okay, because I can't. Can anyone of you talk?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Basically, our prioritized area we decided to work on were financial and procurement, 1 point, HR and general management, which also had or included subcapacity areas, as Kushal mentioned. They are too much, so I can't remember specifically each point. We thought about what the staff need and what the NGO needs,
where are we, and what do we need to improve more and be up to the international, what was the word? International standards. Based on these points, we decided, of course, the scores of the assessment. I forgot that essential point. Based on the scores we had from the assessment, we decided what to work on and what to prioritize.
Thank you so much, Sogita.
Thank you.
To direct, it looks like we have a few questions in the chat directed at Mariamu and Erin. One of them is saying, there is no doubt that caregiver mental health is an important determinant of child's development. However, it's still a new frontier for many implementing partners. What advice do you have for partners who are new to this idea and type of programming? And also, in turn, what advice do you have to donors? So thank you, Ellie, for that rich question. And let's see, which one of you would like to respond, Erin?
I can start, and Mariam, please feel free to add. And I saw Ellie also had a question earlier, right at the beginning too. I can maybe address both of those. She asked about speaking more to the silver lining of what the pandemic was on global awareness of mental health and what COVID's impact was on caregiver mental health. So to that point, I would say that the majority of both anecdotal experience that we've all experienced, but also some of the early research and literature that came out of this last year showed that the pandemic was extremely hard on caregivers in all contexts globally. And that was the majority of the case, certainly so much more taxing, higher responsibilities of children, higher responsibilities, and less social support, being contained at home, trying to juggle potentially school and outside work. That being said, I think there were some really interesting small findings that in occasions there were caregivers that reported increased time with their children, and that actually came out with some fathers being able to say that it was the first time that they'd spent a significant amount of time in the home with their children, and that was a positive. So a small silver lining, not certainly without challenges, but I think globally, the silver lining really was the increased attention. I think that for many countries, realizing in a very immediate way the crisis that COVID brought to mental health really highlighted that a lot of these mental health concerns have been there for a long time and just haven't given attention. So I saw many countries respond to mental health. A lot of new initiatives come out for people during COVID, and I was so excited to see that there was some increased attention to that. And then to the point about what about for new partners and people that are interested, I think that my advice would be to start small. One area would be to start measuring mental health. It's a really challenging thing to measure, but understanding the context and the local needs is a really great first step. And there's a lot of great tools that are out there. I can put some links in the chat about different assessment tools that are available based on what you're trying to assess for social emotional needs. And also just looking at what other organizations have done. One of the reasons we wanted to do this case study of all of the different 15 different organizations is just to give people ideas of what does this look like on the ground? What does this look like to integrate mental health into your programming? And as far as the advice for donors, I would say digging in, our advocacy brief really tried to highlight to donors or to government partners the strong link there is between mental health, and that it's one piece that's very critical to move well-being forward. And so I would encourage donors to not exclude that piece, even though it's been traditionally siloed, but rather to recognize that if we don't have all the components, we cannot reach the final goal of full well-being. Mariamu, do you have anything else to add?
Erin, I think you have summed it well. Can you hear me? Yeah. Great. Yeah, you've summed it very well. And I just wanted to add a little bit about the silver linings of the pandemic question, because as we know, well, we don't know the extent of the impact of COVID on mental health is not really, we still wait for that to see the results down the lane. Yeah, really, we've not yet gotten a full hold of how that has been. But we know for sure that it has contributed to a lot in terms of stress, depression, and being a caregiver generally is can be difficult, even at the best of circumstances. And so really COVID has brought out that fact that caregiver mental health, or just mental health, is an issue, even without, we have seen all the stresses, the anxiety due to the economic impact, loss of income, loss of social networks. We all have children who have really had a tough time because they cannot connect with their fellow students or their friends at school. So they've really been disconnected from those social networks. I have children and I see that in their face, and every time trying to see if they can reach out to their friends, how can they hang out with their friends. All those are stresses that almost fall back to the caregivers particularly. And once the caregiver is stressed out, that almost cascades to the whole family or the people that they interact with. So just being home, being stretched as a caregiver, whether it's providing or cooking. It was a challenge for me in the beginning when we all were home and you have to cook 3, 4, 5 meals that we were not really used to doing in the beginning. And then all those little things that really go into caregiving have been emphasized during this COVID or pandemic year or two that we've been going through. So there's all those anxieties and those, to me, it brings out brings those out. And does really bring the fact that those things exist even before the pandemic, just because they've been enhanced by the pandemic. So I'm glad that that attention is coming to those issues, and particularly for the caregivers.
Thank you so much, Mariamu. I think you made some really relatable points, and also just to note that we're still discovering the impact of COVID-19 globally and its impact on mental health and our wellness. There was some comments in the chat between Tumba and Philip around mental health in conflict settings, and I was just curious if this came across any of your case studies as another factor, or if there was something relevant to highlight around caregiver mental health and with the layer of COVID-19 and perhaps in conflict settings.
We did not get into the details of that, distinguishing between conflict and humanitarian settings, but certainly the needs are exacerbated tremendously in areas of conflict. And I think that, again, the pandemic really just unveiled what has probably already been there, which was a lot of mental health needs that exist for children, for adults, and really, I think, showed that there's a wide range, and that something like a war or a conflict zone can provide a tremendous trigger for underlying depression, or it can be a cause, and a lot of other mental health disorders. So I'm hopeful that this increased attention will also give some increased attention to emergency and conflict settings.
I appreciate that comment, and I would love to hear also from Mariamu about Ellie kind of built on that comment by Ntumba, just like what are the cultural barriers when talking about or seeking help for mental health? Did you all notice anything around stigma, or how we can raise either additional awareness or acceptance for different disorders and challenges, especially when there are so many external issues at play, like including conflicts and the pandemic? So Mariamu, would you like to comment, or would you like to have Erin comment on Ellie's question in the chat around discussing barriers around seeking help for mental health?
Erin, feel free to jump in.
Sure, I can start. I think it's a really important point, and obviously in all countries and contexts, stigma plays a tremendous role. It's a significant barrier. There have been a lot of groups and advocacy groups. I would like to point out the Global Mental Health Action Network that has really worked hard as an advocacy network of collaborators all across the globe, of which we were a part, to advocate specifically against stigma and to really try to increase the norm for open and candid conversation. They've had a really robust set of campaigns. One was called Speak Your Mind. There's some other campaigns that they did around Mental Health Day, World Mental Health Day, to try to normalize conversations about mental health, to really highlight people with lived experience, and to have people that have experienced trauma, depression, psychosis be the ones up front speaking. I think that we've seen small strides in people that already have the spotlight, whether that's someone that's in a high profile profession or government scenario who've been willing to come out and speak about their own mental health challenges. This is a small note, but there was actually a mini series on television that was done across the US and the UK and some Africa partners about mental health recently, that talked about just people that are famous, that are willing to say, like, this is a very, very real struggle. And I think that those small steps can begin to decrease stigma, begin to speaking about mental health holistically and not condemning it as a problem. At a more local level, we've seen a lot of progress when mental health is integrated into preventative care and wellness, and not just isolated when it becomes a real issue, but that just like you would go to antenatal care when you're pregnant, and that's just seen as a step towards wellness, that you would also seek mental health services preventatively, and so that becomes just a norm, and it's not seen as something that's being stigmatized. But we have a long way to go.
Thank you so much. Oh, Mariamu, do you have additional comments?
Yes, I just wanted to add to what Erin said, just that there's still a lot of advocacy that we need to do around mental health and in integrating mental health into our normal programs. And, it's policy, and that's why really the importance of this mini series with FH and granted, with the grant from the Ideal program, is really to fill those gaps, to bring together all these players, the implementers, the researchers, the policymakers, because it touches all those areas. We need policy changes that really incorporate. We lack that very greatly in around the globe. Misinformation, we need to get information. Another thing that we're trying to strive to in developing this community of practice around mental health, particularly caregiver mental health. So it's just to make sure that people are getting the right information. Then, and also we need to look, the cost of mental health services is really high in a lot of these places. So what do we do to make sure that people have access to mental health care? And we said in our slides that, it's especially the low income settings have no access. They have extensive mental health issues, but very little in terms of access to services. So how do we really get to mitigate some of these things? And as I said again, that is really what we are trying to bring this community of practice together to ensure that we can be players in coming days to make sure that mental health is integrated into everything that is done, whether it's policy, finance, and all those things.
Really wonderful points. And I think actually you touched on one of Philip's questions about integrating mental health services and this approach across different kind of levels and areas. So thank you so much for speaking on that. To pivot back, it looks like we have a question for Kushal and Sogita from Gitao. Did you come up with any benchmarks for the assessment factors regarding the HOCIA? And if so, can you talk a little bit about the process for setting those benchmarks? And then maybe Sogita, you could communicate a little bit about how those are showing up in your programming. So Kushal, would you mind reflecting a little bit on the benchmarks that were set for the assessment factors?
Yeah, sure. See, each agency have their different benchmarks, and also some of them are, the Hawkeye tool has some of the ideal benchmark that has given as the statements, like we should have these kind of systems and processes in place. And that is where we rate them on a different scale of not applicable to 5. 5 is the best. And they are the benchmark. And what we need to do during the assessment, we reflect or facilitate to reflect with the partner agencies so that they can realize and understand, okay, this is where we stand because we have these parameters which are met. So each statement comes with a set of benchmark, and also we have to demonstrate using some of the tools or some of the evidences that yes, we have this in place. Like for instance, just a simple thing, whether we have a job description for all the staff. So whether it is there or not, people can say, and some of them, they can say that, okay, look, I don't have a proper job description, and then that needs to be, or if they have an organizational chart in place or not. So that will also means whether it is updated organizational chart, so that they can look into it. So all the statements comes with that kind of requirement, which is if it is fulfilled, if it is there, it can do that. It also gives another interesting dimension, if I may add. There could be a group of participants who are new and old. So sometimes the old people, they feel everything is there in place. The new people may not be aware of it. So this is also an understanding about like how do we, an opportunity for the organization to tell, oh, we have a vision and mission, but it is not shared with this new people who have joined maybe in the last couple of months. So they realize, oh, we need to do this. So sometimes it is that kind of simple things. When there is a mismatch, some people say that, yes, we have this. Some people say we don't have this. Okay, where it is, can we share that? So that is the kind of interaction, and that is the kind of things that we are trying to say here. And also to respond to one of the questions that is there, that, okay, people have felt like, how do we know that it is there or not? So it is basically to go back to those benchmarks and then try to see how we can respond to them. So Geeta, if you want to add something.
Yes, while Kushal was talking, I remembered a very important thing that we faced in the assessment. Kushal mentioned the new and the old employees taking the assessment and doing the assessment. The assessment actually allowed us as the management team, let's say, to see how are we including the other staff in the information we have and the processes we have in the organization. Since we were a very new organization, we kind of internally assessed to what extent are the employees involved in the processes and the information we have about the NGOs, about our entity. So it may not be related to the assessment directly, but it was a positive thing we could notice during the assessment.
Thank you, Sugita. Also, I wanted to raise Luisa's question from the chat to you too. She asks, did you all go through all 10 elements of the Hawkeye, or did you select a few for the virtual assessment? If latter, how did you select the elements to focus on?
Yeah,
And
I was actually typing it, but then I can explain. Yes, in this particular case, we went through all the 10 elements, basically because the organization is new. And also they are doing this for the first time. So we wanted to have all the elements to be seen from a holistic perspective. But this tool is a flexible one. And if it's, again, at the end of the day, it is my organization or your organization, and you are deciding to do an assessment, you feel you want to do only for the HR system. So you can do for the HR system. It is a standalone. Also, it can tell some of the areas, its subcomponents and all that. But then if we want to do it as a holistic way, those are the 10 elements. But then I have done it for some of our partners who wanted to explore and dig deep into just one element. So they can be done as a separate unit as well.
Thank you so much, Kushal. And thank you to all of our presenters, Mariamu, Erin, and Sogita as well, for sharing your resources and speaking on these really important learnings from this COVID-19 era. I want to invite all the participants to take our survey. We have a short survey, 2 or 3 questions, just to hear how you liked the session so that we can continue to improve on the format of our learning events. I also want to encourage you to look for the future events that are coming up the rest of the day, as well as on Wednesday and Thursday. That being said, we have about 2 minutes to close. I just want to reiterate that we'll share those resources, and they're shared in the chat, as well as give each of our speakers maybe 10 seconds to say one or two one takeaway from your resource as well as this learning session. We'll start with Kushal.
Sure. One takeaway is that this is a wonderful tool to use and assess the organization, and it gives a guidance and a direction to the organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kushal. Sogita?
Yes, given the limited time we had in implementing the project and assessing ourselves, I would say that being flexible is like very crucial in this experience, and yeah, that would be the main point. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Being flexible is highly important. Erin?
Thank you. I would just encourage everyone to consider mental health, to put yourself out there, to explore what is going on globally. It's a really exciting time. And I'm going to put here in the link again, our website, where you can explore the resources. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Erin. And then Mariamu?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Grace. I just wanted to really express the importance of mental health, and it really does touch, and I think Phil and someone else did comment on that it affects, it's really multidimensional. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of that plays into a good mental health, and it touches a lot of our development issues that we really strive every day to improve. So it is not just a standalone. It does really impact a lot that we do, whether it's food security or child development, and all these areas are really are key indicators of development. So we just need to make sure that we continue with this community of practice for mental health and keep striving to find ways to integrate it into our programs.
Thank you so much, Mariamu. I think that's a perfect point for us to close on. Again, thank you to all of our presenters and participants for joining today, for sharing your questions in this learning exchange. Please take a minute to fill out our evaluation, and we look forward to seeing you all in the future sessions.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice being here. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, and I always forget this, but can we maybe pause and turn on our cameras for a picture to capture the participation for this event just for a moment before we sign off? If you're able to turn your camera on just for a picture, all the beautiful faces. So good to see everyone. All right, and we'll take the picture in 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing to do that, and enjoy the rest of the learning session.
Bye.
Have a great time. All the best for the remaining sessions. Bye-bye.
Papa Ibe. How many?
Okay, I have removed everyone. Thank you so